On this episode of Walk a Mile in Their Shoes, we are at the Sycamore Trail Park in West Jordan, Utah. Our guest today is Michelle Hunt.
Hi, I'm Michelle Hunt. I currently work as an authorization specialist for genetic testing. I am married, I have 2 kids. I like reading and puzzles and grandma hobbies. So come walk a mile in my shoes.
Hi, Michelle.
Hey,
it's
Jared.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, I love that we are here because this is really close to our house, but neither of us have ever been here.
It's true.
So that's really exciting.
Yes.
It's kind of like this mountain abyss out there, it looks like, that we're headed to. But
it does. Very dry.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully you're ready to move around a little bit.
Yes, let's do this.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to, just right from the get-go, I want to bring up a word that comes up a lot, and that word is fulfillment. And the reason why I bring that up is so many people that I and probably you encounter, they're having a hard time, here, why don't we head down this way? They're having a hard time finding fulfillment. Maybe they don't like their jobs very much. Maybe they just find that life is dull and just kind of the mundane parts of life. They have a hard time finding fulfillment. So I wanted to ask you, how do you find fulfillment in your everyday life?
When I think about fulfillment, for me, I feel the most fulfilled when I am probably with my family, I would say, because in that way, I feel like they fill my cup, I fill their cup. It's kind of, I want to see them happy, they want to see me happy. Mm-hmm. And so that for me is the most fulfilling on like a big level. Of course, there are other smaller things that make me feel fulfilled. I've got a little bit of the OCD, so I like puzzles and cross-stitching, right? Those things kind of solve that because it's everything has an end, a very complete ending. So
family and kind of the important people in your life help you find purpose and fulfillment.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I agree with that a lot. How about because we spend so much time in our jobs, our workplace, and some of us find a lot of fulfillment just naturally in that setting, but some of us struggle with that. What's your secret for finding fulfillment in just your job?
Oh, in my job.
Setting? Yeah.
Well, luckily, I think, I'm going to kind of launch into a story naturally, hopefully, because my career choice actually is based around that kind of fulfillment, because I originally got a degree in communications. I was working for a TV station, but pretty early on there, about 2 years in, my dad had terminal cancer. So he died while I was there, and it kind of was like this big wake-up call that TV is not entertainment industry. Who cares about all of that stuff? I wanted to make a bigger difference, specifically with cancer patients. So I moved to the genetic testing company, Myriad Genetics, for a name drop, because they worked to do genetic testing to help cancer patients. When I first started there as a patient advocate, so I worked a lot with patients and doctors and trying to get testing covered. Like, it felt so good to be an advocate for that. And now I do more of the authorization side, which is less to do with patients and doctors. But the root is still there, knowing that this company works so hard to, get research and to figure out ways to figure out things. So that for me is so, it's what keeps me going to my work every day, is because there is awful things about the job, but at the root of it, these names and dates of births, they are people, and they need help. They're here for, they want to get testing for a reason. So yeah, that's a very long answer for your question.
That's a great answer, because you know, it sounds like you do a lot of sort of data entry. You're staring at a computer screen a lot, and that would be so easy to just get lost in this sort of, you know, soulless work, I guess, for lack of a better phrasing. But you actually see people. You see, you know, more than just a name, but like what's behind those people, and you see that these people need help. And you're thinking of those people. You're thinking of your family and what connected you to this particular job. And so I love that you're finding purpose in work that, you know, for a lot of people may not be very fulfilling, but you're giving it purpose. I love that.
I try to on my good days, right?
Yeah.
Still a job.
Yeah.
Still gets hard sometimes.
Yes. So. Yeah, a lot of ups and downs for sure. So, you know, along those lines, and you've kind of mentioned this a little bit already, but when we talk about mental health, it's important. Excuse me. It's important that we focus on kind of the day-to-day things that we do to maintain good mental health. So I'm curious about you and the little things that you do day in and day out. You mentioned kind of being with family, things like that. But what else do you do to kind of prevent burnout and just maintain strong mental health?
Ooh, these are silly things. I think day to day, communicating, talking about things with my husband, my partner. I mean, he's my partner, and so I like to, that is so important for me when it comes to mental health, even the little things, to talk to him about it. Specifically, that's not the silly thing. The silly thing I was thinking of is to set my brain on ice. You know, at the end of the day, I try to find something to just turn my brain off. So right now, me and my husband, or just me sometimes, we'll play Stardew Valley, a little cozy gaming where there's no pressure, no stakes, no missions, just do stupid farming things. So that's really good for my day-to-day, or reading books, as I mentioned. Easy to lose myself in the world and kind of let things go.
Yeah. So taking time to, again, be with those important people in your life, like your husband, kids as well, but also just to have some, like you say, low stakes recreation.
Yes, exactly.
I love that phrasing. That's great. I love that. Good. Well, another thing I wanted to ask you about is, you know, when we talk about mental health, we have those little day-to-day things we do, but there's also times where we're really tested in that area, right? So I was wondering if you'd be willing to share a time or two when that mental health was really tested and you really had to figure out ways to get through a difficult time or a difficult stretch.
Yeah, there's so many days.
Yeah.
So many times.
Yeah.
I think, and I mean, this is probably the hardest time in my life, was I feel, I don't like talking about death very much, but that is very difficult. I think about the hardest time in my life is when people I have loved have passed. I was thinking about like my dad with cancer, or my little brother. He died from suicide. It was really hard on mental health because it's like out of my control, and they're people I love, and their absence can weigh pretty heavy. And you were asking specifically for strategies, correct?
Well, just,
or
you know,
what?
you know, particularly in those times, like with the deaths with your family, obviously that's severe and traumatic for sure. And so I'm just curious, maybe people you relied on in those moments, or resources that you took advantage of, or just other things that really helped you get through or manage during those particularly difficult times?
All right. So, so many resources I relied on during those times. With my dad passing, it was hard because I felt like I couldn't rely on my family in that way because they were all kind of in the same place. At that point, I also discovered I had chronic illness, so it was kind of a lot to deal with. I did at that point turn to a counselor, therapist for a short while. It wasn't very long, but just to kind of help sort things out.
Yeah.
And that was helpful. Friends and neighbors and community for sure. Countless times I had people bring me meals or cookies or things like that. Hugs, even just being there as someone to talk to. Those were really helpful. I think just crying. You don't need people. You can just cry. So that, I feel like, allows that release of emotion, and that has helped me a lot. There's obviously the religious things where prayer or scriptures, that type of thing, has helped me a lot in the past as well in those difficult times. But with limits, it helps in knowing, believing in God and that they are living on.
Yeah.
So those are long answers.
Oh, those are great answers. I love that. It seems like kind of the theme is connection, right? And that's something that I think about a lot, is whenever we deal with these traumatic experiences, we're not really getting through them alone, are we?
No.
You know, we're reaching out to counselors or therapists, close friends, family, some sort of higher being or higher power, whatever that may be for you. It's that human connection, or just connection with anybody, right? That helps us get through these things, I think. Yeah. So I love that you shared that. Kind of a related question, because you've had some time to think back on these particular instances. Well, if you could step into your time machine, your DeLorean, and have a conversation with your younger self, what would you tell her in those moments?
I think lots of things, I guess, and some of them are unrelated, like you don't have to solve everything, or rely on those around you. Really, like you said, connection, I think, with those around me, that connection is so healing, I think. So I think relying on that, letting things go, and living in the moment, I think, those two, which is hard when people pass away, because it's that those memories and those times are always the forefront.
Right. I love that you brought that up, because that's something that comes up a lot. Living in the moment, or mindfulness, right? Something we talk about a lot in mental health circles. And you brought it up in the context of death, because it's very difficult to live in the present moment when we're thinking about somebody who has passed away, right? What advice or counsel would you give to somebody in terms of living in the moment or being mindful? To someone who just had somebody pass away?
That's tricky.
Yeah.
Because I say being present, because at the time when these people passed, I have kids, I'm married, and I think it's important to, they're the next generation. They're especially when it comes to my dad, like grandkids and stuff. So it's like embracing them, but also being not cognizant. What's the word I'm looking for? Just thinking. Heart, I guess. I find times with my kids during that time and now to bring up my brother and my dad. But really, it's so hard to move on after they pass with that. So be in the moment, feel the feelings, those kind of things.
I love that. I love that you said feel the feelings, because so many people that I encounter don't want to feel those feelings, right? It's too hard to feel the feelings.
It hurts.
And it hurts. It's unpleasant. We run away from it.
Yes.
We run. That's our instinct, is to run away from unpleasant things. But what happens when we don't feel those feelings, right? Boom.
Gets bad. Explodes.
Gets really bad. And so I love that you have given yourself that permission to feel those feelings, to have those days. And there's that idea of, some people call it moving on. I just call it moving forward. I think moving on is kind of like, I'm leaving all that behind, right? But when we move forward, we take all that wisdom that somebody who has passed on has given to us. And we take those memories, but we do it in a sense of being able to move forward. And so I like that idea of being able to move forward, still living in the present, but taking what they have taught us with us.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that you mentioned those scenarios, because death is probably the hardest thing we do, in life, saying goodbye to somebody.
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, do you have other instances, because previously you mentioned that it was going to be hard for you to level it down. Do you have another instance where you struggled to get through a trying time?
I mean, there's multiple. When you first were mentioning it, because of your job, I thought immediately of when I was a teenager, and I moved when I was like 12, and I had such a hard time mentally at that point, because not only were you I was at that stage, where you figure out who you are at like 12, like what you really, what kind of kid, what kind of teenager you want to be. I was in a new neighborhood, I had no friends, and the friends I did have lived so far away, like it was really hard. It was really hard. And my parents, love them, but they also, I don't think, were as aware, or boomers, I guess. I don't know. Like, you don't need medication, you don't need a therapist, you got to figure it out on your own. And that was really difficult too, because at 12 years old, I don't know I don't know what to do with these ugly feelings. So that point was immediately when you asked me to do this, was my first thought, because I remember sitting in my room, and I used to journal a lot. So I would journal and draw pictures, and they were all so dark and awful. And that time in my life was really hard, because I felt like the only thing I had was prayer, was like God, right? And it feels like with religion sometimes, and at 12 years old, you don't know how to approach religion. Prayer did not do the things that I needed it to do at that point in my life. So that is a time in my life that I think about. It was such a dark place. You want to try that?
Should we? religion or spirituality, that's not always easy for a youngster to embrace. So it sounds like you had other ways of coping through those times, right? Whether it's through artwork or were you a big reader yourself back then?
Yeah, so reading a lot, and also a little bit after that time, I started to really, going back to connection, throw myself into, this is connection adjacent, because I really started to focus on active things to do. I tried out for the basketball team, I did track and field, cross country, like sports, even though I was terrible. I was so bad. But basketball I was okay at, but running I was terrible at. But those activities, kind of creates that connection. I really do feel like connection, for me at least, is the biggest support for those negative mental health stuff. And as a teenager, that's hard to do, to find and seek out that connection when it's easier to sit in your room, draw those dark pictures or think those dark thoughts. It's hard to get out of that. But activity or extracurriculars, that was kind of my way to kind of get out of it in a way. I don't think it went away for lots of years, but it helps to get out of that spot.
Yeah, that's really tricky because with the way our technology is set up now, we're connected to people, but it's often from far away.
Yeah,
right?
the digital text messages.
And so, yeah, in that sense, that's great that we're this sort of global community now, and people, whether kids or adults, they can connect with people like them, and it doesn't have to be face to face. That part is good. And there's also that part that you've been talking about, where that face to face, physical contact or connection that's needed. And sometimes people just have a very difficult time getting out there for that. What's maybe just a bit of advice that you could give to somebody who's really struggling to just get out there and have that physical connection with people?
Ooh, because that's hard. I felt like it was easier for me, and I'll get to that, I promise, but easier for me because I have older siblings. My brothers and my sister all did sports, so it was easy. It was kind of like a natural transition because this is what they did, so something I can do. But for like the average teenager, it's not as easy as that. What would I recommend to somebody who needs that push, or what to get them? I think I would say to evaluate their tech consumption or social media consumption, even like put timers on it and start there, like limit so that's my first thing. My mind is like spinning with so many ideas now. The second thing that I would say is embrace what you love on whatever level that is outside of technology. So find those things that make you happy, even better if they're movement active things. When I was in middle school and high school, running is it feels good for my brain. I can listen to music, the music I like, so it's like all that good stuff I like. Are the two things, or the second thing I like. And the third thing is to try to like look for your weaknesses. And I think, because this is something I've been thinking about a lot, is find those things that you struggle with and maybe want to improve a little bit. Because when you're working on yourself and trying to improve yourself, I feel like that's such a positive movement forward for your physical, mental, spiritual, all that jazz. Like when you're moving forward and upgrading yourself, if you will. Like those things can be really positive for your mental health. What are the 3 things that come to mind? Because those are the 3 things that have really helped me, I think, throughout my life even. So
yeah, I love that. I love that you're kind of like, hey, you know, I need to embrace this weakness, you know? And so I love that that's a way for you to improve mental health. That's the way you feel that. And I love that you mentioned like finding something beyond technology. And I think that's a big reason why all of our high schools and junior highs, even elementaries, have these clubs, right? It's to connect people with you know, common interests.
yeah.
So I love that. And then watching our social media consumption, or just technology consumption in general. Why are we using it? Because it's not inherently bad. It's just how we use it that can be an issue.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, we are at a mile now.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you one last question. You know, when we do these types of interviews, I kind of want to give you the opportunity to address somebody out there who may be really struggling with their mental health, and just some things that you would tell them. You've kind of mentioned a lot of things today about along those lines, but just kind of, I want you to think about just that one person who may be really, really struggling and just needs something in terms of, you know, how do I keep going? What would you say to that person?
Oh man, that makes me feel emotional. If I could say to someone who's really struggling, you're gonna be okay. Every minute, every hour, every day, like little steps, you'll get there. You'll be okay. Reach out for help. If you don't feel like you can trust certain people, go to other people. Like when I was a teenager, I couldn't go to my parents. If you can't go to your parents, find a leader, a friend, even a peer. Find somebody you can talk to and connect with. You'll be okay.
Thanks for sharing that. I know that will help somebody out there who needs that, because there's always somebody who's just barely holding on. And so I'm grateful that you were willing to share those thoughts today. Or we said more or less on the mile, so we did more.
All right.
So I'm grateful for your thoughts and being willing to share what you did today. It was a real privilege to be able to walk with you today. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Jared.